Comet McTurnip wasn't your average astrophysicist. With fiery red hair that refused to stay combed, tribal tattoos wrapping his arms, and a thick Scottish accent more suited to bar fights than satellite feeds, he carved out a peculiar niche in the internet science community. He almost exclusively spoke about space weather, the strange brew of solar flares, geomagnetic storms, and cosmic radiation that most of humanity ignored unless it started knocking out their Wi Fi. But what definitely got clicks, his grand, clickbaity predictions, promises of the apocalypse that managed to straddle the line between absurd and oddly plausible. On Tuesday, April 29th, 2025, Comet was in rare form. His livestream screen wasn't filled with his usual dramatic fonts or hastily cobbled together graphics. Instead, a high-resolution satellite image of New Zealand loomed behind him, glowing ominously in shades of red and orange. Overlaid on the map were three pinpointed earthquakes, each above a magnitude of 6.8.
Lads, what you've got here isn't just your average rumble down south. These plates are basically holding hands, three separate quakes in one line. Do you know what that means? Pressure's billin', and this is only the beginning.
Comet paused for dramatic effect, leaning closer into his mic like he was sharing a dark secret. Now, you mix that with the sun's 11-year solar maximum, the most glorious period of activity our star ever manages. We're talking mega sunspots, electromagnetic bursts, solar winds strong enough to shave the hairs off a lion's backside. And right now, Earth ain't just in the crosshairs. We're practically inviting the bullets. The camera panned slightly, showing his fingers tapping on a graph depicting massive solar flares, one aligned perfectly with New Zealand's coordinates. And what happens when all this ionized radiation and magnetism runs down into our molten little rock? It doesn't just tickle the tectonic plates. It gives them the cosmic equivalent of a good old shove. And those fault lines, they won't politely stay where they are. This could ripple right across the Pacific Basin, folks. Worst case scenario, Hawaii, gone. His followers were accustomed to his flair for exaggeration, but this time his tone had shifted. From his tribal tattooed bicep to the strained tremor in his voice, Comet McTurnip was genuinely alarmed. Enter Mark Poutine, Canadian earthquake scientist, environmental advocate, and arguably the most low-profile celebrity in geophysics. Unlike Comet, Mark was subdued and serious, the kind of man whose every sweater choice seemed like an apology for being comfortable. He had no time for theatricality when disaster was at hand. He stumbled upon Comet's video during a routine survey of earthquake monitoring channels and nearly dropped his mug of maple syrup-tinted coffee when he saw the data. Mark didn't care about Comet McTurnip's tattoos or his questionable scientific metaphors about lion backsides. What he cared about were the implications presented. If these fault lines released all their building energy under the duress of intensified magnetospheric heat from solar irradiance, not only would New Zealand crack like an eggshell, but the resulting shockwaves could cut through the Pacific in ways mathematicians barely understood. "What do they even call him?" Mark muttered, his weathered Canadian accent soft as he scrawled notes. "Turnip? Fine. If the angry vegetable on YouTube's right, Hawaii doesn't have time for my usual red tape." And so, without hesitation, Mark booked a flight to Washington, determined to warn policymakers before time quite literally ran out. Unfortunately, Washington had seen better days, and at its helm sat the figurehead of what many considered to be its worst days, President Donald Trump 2.0. If Trump's first tenure had been marked by chaos, confusion, and reality TV antics, his second time in the Oval Office had evolved into unchecked absurdity. He was blustery, unpredictable, and obsessed with public perception. Every day, he threatened to rename NASA the Trump Intergalactic Agency for winning, and declared himself smarter than the Earth. Under his leadership, most scientific institutions had been gutted. Space weather monitoring was now considered liberal witchcraft. When Mark arrived, Fox News was already broadcasting segments mocking him. "This Canadian's here," one anchor guffawed, "trying to tell us that tribal tattoos and turnips are going to save Hawaii. He sounds almost as crazy as the weather guy." But Mark didn't falter. He pressed into the Capitol building, ignored the jeers that followed him, and demanded to meet the administration's officials. His presentation was blunt, terrifyingly clear. If we ignore this convergence, solar activity paired with tectonic instability, we could be facing one of the deadliest chain earthquakes in recorded history. Hawaii isn't just at risk. Entire coastlines of the Americas could feel the ripple effects. Trump 2.0 dismissed the situation in his usual fashion. Moronic convergence? He smirked to reporters later. That's what the guy called it? Amazing name. Huge moronic energy. But let me tell you, we're going to be fine. Tremendous fine. With government cooperation gridlocked, Mark and Comet MacTurnip became an unlikely alliance, combining Canadian diligence with fiery Scottish passion. Together, they launched a crowdfunding campaign to build private monitoring stations and open public awareness. Against all odds, their collaboration ignited an international movement. Together, their efforts resonated far and wide, drawing people from every corner of the globe into their mission to safeguard the planet. As April closed, the Earth itself decided if humanity's desperate gamble had been enough, or whether cosmic forces would render debates, and Hawaii, irrelevant.